2. Claimed by the Alpha Seawolf. Annika and Kai. The apartment was dark when Annika heard the window slide open. She didn't startle, hadn't for months now. The soft scrape of wood against wood, the whisper of curtains shifting, the careful placement of bare feet on hardwood. Kai moved like shadow and moonlight, all predator grace, even in human form. "You're going to get arrested one day," she murmured into her pillow, not bothering to turn over. "Breaking and entering is still illegal, especially when you're naked." A low chuckle, rough as gravel. "Only if someone reports it." The mattress dipped behind her. His skin was cool, not cold, but carrying the bite of night air and ocean spray. She felt goosebumps rise along his forearm as it draped across her waist. "Long run?" she asked softly. "Very long." His voice held an exhaustion that went beyond physical. He pressed his face into her hair, breathing her in like she was oxygen. "Vancouver Island to here. Didn't stop." Annika's breath caught. Vancouver Island to the California coast, hundreds of miles as the crow flies. Longer following the shoreline. He'd run the entire distance as Wolf, which meant he'd shifted back only moments ago, probably in the alley behind her building. "Kai, I needed to see you." The words were muffled against her neck, but the desperate edge in them was unmistakable. Couldn't wait another day. She rolled over to face him, her eyes adjusting to find his features in the darkness. Salt-streaked hair falling loose around his shoulders. Silver eyes shadowed with something she couldn't name, the hard lines of his face softened only by exhaustion. "What happened?" "Nothing. Everything." His hand found her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone. "Does it matter?" It should. She should press him, demand answers about what drove him to run hundreds of miles through the night just to climb through her window. But the look in his eyes stopped her. Raw need barely held in check. "Dex thinks I'm dating a drug dealer," she said instead, offering him the out. "The mysterious late-night visits, the secrecy, the way you show up looking like you've been through hell." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "What did you tell him?" "That my dealer has better abs." Now he smiled, a flash of white teeth in the darkness. Some of the tension in his shoulders finally eased. "I missed you," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. His beard was longer than last time, rough against her palm. "You have no idea." His hand covered hers, pressing it against his cheek. "I tried to stay away. Made it 3 weeks this time." 3 weeks, the longest he'd managed since these visits started. "Why do you try to stay away at all?" The question hung between them in the darkness. 4 years of these stolen moments, these midnight reunions, and still he looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous. "Annika." Her name was a prayer and a warning. She knew what he wasn't saying, the same unspoken thing that had hung between them for months now, growing heavier with each visit. But instead of pushing, she simply shifted over, making room for him in her narrow bed. Kai hesitated for just a moment, propriety warring with need. Then he slid in beside her, and she turned into his warmth instinctively. His skin had already absorbed the heat of her apartment, chasing away the ocean's chill. "Just for tonight," he murmured against her hair, arms wrapping around her. "I just needed—" "I know." She pressed her face into his chest, breathing in cedar and salt and something wild that clung to his skin, even in human form. "I needed it too." They lay together in the darkness, her smaller form curved against his larger one. His hand stroked slowly through her hair, and she could feel the last of the tension gradually leaving his body. "How long can you stay?" she asked quietly. "Till dawn." "Not long enough. It was never long enough." "The run back will be easier," he added, his voice already drowsy. "Following the current south is always harder than riding it north." She filed that detail away, another small piece of the puzzle that was Kai. A seawolf who followed ocean current, who ran the coastline rather than inland routes. "Kai?" "Whatever's happening up north. You can tell me. You know that, right?" His hand stilled in her hair. For a moment she thought he might actually answer. Then he pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Sleep, sweetheart. We'll talk in the morning." But they both knew he'd be gone before she woke up. He always was. Annika closed her eyes and let herself sink into the warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. Whatever was driving him to run hundreds of miles just to hold her, whatever he was running from or toward, she'd take these stolen hours. For now, it was enough. The streetlight filtering through her curtains painted them in shades of silver and shadow, two bodies curled together, fitting like they'd been designed for exactly this. His breathing gradually slowed, deepened, but even in sleep, his arms stayed locked around her. Protective. Possessive. Mine asterisk, something whispered in the back of her mind, though she couldn't tell if the thought was hers or his. Chapter 1, Scene 2, Ghost Traces. Morning. Annika's apartment. Annika woke to empty sheets and pale morning light. She didn't need to reach across the bed to confirm what she already knew. Kai was gone. The pillow beside hers still held the indent of his head, and when she pressed her face into it, she could smell cedar and salt. But the warmth had long since faded. Every time asterisk, she thought, staring at the ceiling. Every single time. Her phone showed 7:43 a.m. Early enough that the building was still quiet, late enough that he'd have had plenty of time to shift and disappear into the pre-dawn darkness. She wondered if he paused at her window, looked back. Probably not. Kai didn't do hesitation. He made his decisions and executed them with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else, including leaving. Annika sat up, pushing hair out of her face, and that's when she noticed it. On her nightstand, carefully placed beside her water glass, a piece of sea glass. Smooth, frosted green, worn by decades of ocean tumbling until the edges were soft as silk. She picked it up, running her thumb across the surface. He'd never left anything behind before. The glass was still slightly damp, carrying the mineral scent of deep water. He must have found it during his run down the coast, plucked it from some midnight beach, and carried it in his mouth for hundreds of miles. The image made her chest ache. This massive wolf, powerful enough to run the length of the Pacific coast, carefully holding a small piece of glass between his teeth like a treasure. For her, she closed her fist around it, feeling the smooth weight settle into her palm. "Damn you, Kai," she whispered to the empty room. By the time she made it to campus, she'd almost convinced herself she was fine. The University of California's marine biology building sat right on the coast, all glass and steel, designed to frame the Pacific in every window. Annika had chosen this school specifically for its ocean access, for the research opportunities, for the way the salt air made her feel alive in a way landlocked universities never could. She told herself it had nothing to do with being closer to Kai's territory up north. "You look like hell," Dex announced, falling into step beside her as she crossed the quad. "Late night?" Annika's hand went instinctively to her pocket, where the sea glass rested like a secret. "Couldn't sleep?" "Uh-huh." Dex studied her with the particular intensity of someone who'd been trying to figure her out for 3 months and kept hitting walls. You know, most people's insomnia doesn't leave them looking quite so satisfied. Heat flooded her cheeks. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." He grinned, adjusting the messenger bag slung across his shoulder. Dex was attractive in an accessible boy-next-door way. Sandy hair, easy smile, the kind of guy who looked good in both a wetsuit and a button-down. He was smart, funny, passionate about ocean conservation. On paper, he was perfect. And she felt absolutely nothing when he touched her. "So listen," Dex continued as they climbed the steps to the Marine Sciences building. "There's a protest this weekend. That new offshore drilling proposal, we're organizing a beach demonstration, trying to get media coverage. You in?" "Maybe. I have to check my schedule." "You always have to check your schedule." There was an edge to his voice now, frustration bleeding through the casual tone. "Sometimes I think you're more committed to your mysterious schedule than to actual conservation work." Annika stopped walking. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Dex turned to face her fully. "You're brilliant, Annika. Your thesis on orca communication patterns is groundbreaking, but you're also absent. Like half of you is always somewhere else." Vancouver Island, she thought, running the coastline, climbing through my window at midnight. "I'm here," she said quietly. "Are you?" Dex's expression softened. "Because I like you. I really do, but I can't compete with a ghost." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, grateful for the interruption, then froze. Unknown number, but the message made her heart stop. "Wear it close. Stay safe. K." Her hand went to her pocket again, fingers closing around the sea glass. He'd never texted before, never left a trace that could be tracked or saved. The fact that he'd broken that pattern now. "Everything okay?" Dex asked. "Fine." She shoved the phone back in her pocket, forcing a smile. Just my sister. The scary one or the married one? The married one. The lie came easily. Too easily. Dex studied her for another moment, then shook his head. You're a terrible liar, you know that? I know. But I'm going to pretend I believe you anyway, because I'm a nice guy. He started walking again, and she fell into step beside him. The protest is Saturday at noon. If your mysterious schedule clears up, we could use you. Your voice matters, Annika, even if you don't always believe it. She watched him disappear into the building, then turned to look at the ocean. The Pacific stretched endlessly before her, gray-green and restless under the morning clouds. Somewhere up that coast, Kai was probably already back in his territory, already putting distance between them again, physical and emotional. But he'd left her the sea glass, and he'd told her to stay safe. Annika pulled out her phone, staring at the message. Her thumb hovered over the reply button, a dozen questions fighting to be typed. Why did you leave? When will you come back? What am I supposed to do with these feelings that get stronger every time I see you? Instead, she typed, It's beautiful, thank you. The response came almost immediately. So are you. Then before she could reply, Delete these messages. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then slowly she deleted the thread. But the sea glass stayed in her pocket, a smooth weight against her hip as she headed into class.
Chapter 2. First Spark. Revised. Kai's POV only. Spring 2026. Northern Territories. Declan's Packlands. Kai's POV. Same day. Kai smelled her before he even reached the clearing. Wildflowers, sweet and distinctly human, cutting through the familiar pack scents of cedar and wolf musk. His steps faltered on the forest path, every instinct suddenly screaming at him to turn around, to leave before he saw the source of that scent. But Declan was his dearest friend. They were both alpha pack leaders with too much history. Missing his claiming ceremony wasn't an option. So Kai forced himself forward, emerging from the tree line with the other visiting alphas. The clearing was already filling with pack members, children running between the adults, everyone dressed in their ceremony best. His eyes scanned the crowd automatically, cataloging threats and allies out of habit. Then he saw her. Blonde curls, tight spirals that caught the afternoon sunlight like spun gold. She stood beside Zentraya and another woman who had to be their mother, her face turned up toward the towering cedars with an expression of pure wonder. Even from across the clearing, he could see her eyes. Bright blue, the color of shallow tropical waters. The mate bond slammed into him like a physical blow. No. Kai's vision tunneled, his wolf surging forward with such force that he had to lock every muscle to keep from shifting right there. She was human, young, delicate, completely unprepared for what his world would demand. And she was his, in a way that bypassed all logic and reason, and went straight to the most primal part of his nature. Mate, go to her, claim her. She's ours. She's Zen's little sister, Kai shot back desperately. She's human. She doesn't know what we are. But the wolf didn't care. The wolf only knew that its mate was 50 feet away, and every second of separation was agony. You all right? Marcus, alpha of the mountain territories, gave him a concerned look. You look like you're about to shift. Fine. The word came out as a growl. Kai forced his breathing to steady, forced his hands to unclench. Just need a minute. He moved to the back of the gathering, as far from her as he could get while still being present. People would assume he was being antisocial. Typical Kai. Keeping his distance, showing up but not really participating. Let them think that. It was better than the truth. The truth was that he was fighting the most fundamental drive of his nature, and losing. From his position in the last row, Kai watched her. He couldn't help it. His eyes tracked every movement, every gesture, cataloging details with the intensity of a predator studying prey. Except she wasn't prey. She was mate, which was somehow infinitely worse. The way she tucked a curl behind her ear when the wind caught it. The soft gasp when Declan began speaking the old words. The tears that slipped down her cheeks when the claiming bite was given. Not tears of fear, but of wonder. Like she understood the beauty of what she was witnessing, even if she didn't fully comprehend the reality. When the pack howled their approval, Kai had to physically lock his jaw to keep from joining them. If he shifted now, if he let the wolf take over even for a moment, he'd go straight to her. And that couldn't happen. She needs protection, he told himself desperately. And the most dangerous thing in this clearing is me. The celebration was exquisite torture. Kai maintained his position on the periphery, nursing a drink he didn't taste, watching her from across the gathering. She'd found a spot away from the main crowd, sitting alone by one of the smaller bonfires. Smart, giving herself space to process, to observe without being overwhelmed. Every protective instinct in his body screamed at him to go to her, to make sure she was comfortable, to shield her from any pack member who might approach too aggressively. But he forced himself to stay back, to give her the distance she needed. Distance from him. The predator who wanted to claim her. He watched her watch the pack, saw the wonder in her expression, as children shifted mid-play, the careful way she observed the social dynamics. She wasn't afraid, cautious, yes, but not frightened. There was a strength in her that belied her delicate appearance, a core of steel wrapped in softness. Of course, his wolf purred. Our mate is strong. When the wind shifted, carrying her scent directly to him, Kai's hands clenched so hard around his cup that the metal dented. Wildflowers and something uniquely her, sweet and clean and utterly intoxicating. He could pick her out of a crowd of thousands now, could track her across continents if he had to. The mate bond was a living thing in his chest, pulling at him like a fishhook lodged in his heart. Go to her, the wolf demanded. She's alone. She needs us. She needs to be safe from us, Kai argued back. We're a predator, an alpha. We could hurt her without meaning to. We would never hurt mate. Not physically. But there are other ways to hurt someone. So Kai stayed in the shadows, watching her golden curls catch the firelight, tracking every small movement like his life depended on memorizing her. Hours passed. The celebration continued around them, and still he couldn't make himself leave. Couldn't make himself stop watching. Finally, when the crowd had thinned and she sat alone by the dying fire, Kai's control snapped. Not completely. He didn't shift, didn't claim, didn't do any of the things his wolf was screaming for. But he couldn't stay away anymore. Couldn't spend another minute watching from the shadows when he could be near her, could hear her voice, could confirm that the bond was real. Just talk to her, he told himself. Just see if she's real. He approached slowly, carefully, every movement deliberate. Even so, he saw her heartbeat kick up when she registered his presence. Some primal part of her recognizing the predator, even if her conscious mind didn't understand the threat. Overwhelming, isn't it? He said, settling for casual conversation when what he wanted to do was drop to his knees and beg her to accept him. When she turned to look at him, the full force of those blue eyes hit him square in the chest. Up close, she was even more beautiful. Delicate features, soft skin, and those incredible curls that his fingers itched to touch. The mate bond flared so bright, he nearly staggered. Control, control. You're Zentreya's sister, he managed, proud that his voice came out steady instead of the growl his wolf wanted. Annika. Her name. Finally, he had her name, and it was perfect, musical and strong and utterly suited to her. And you're... Kai. He gestured to the space beside her, every instinct screaming at him to get closer, while his rational mind warned him to keep his distance. May I? If you're not afraid. Please be afraid, part of him begged. Run, save yourself from this. But she laughed, bright and unguarded, and said she wasn't afraid of him. Yet. The word sent a thrill through him that he had no right to feel. Kai sat, leaving careful space between them, even though the wolf wanted to eliminate every inch of distance. This close, her scent was overwhelming. Wildflowers and something sweet that made his mouth water. He could hear her heartbeat, steady and strong. Could see the pulse fluttering at her throat, where he wanted to set his claiming bite. No, she's under your protection. That means protecting her from you. When the wind caught her hair, lifting those golden curls, he found himself tracking each spiral with predatory focus. The way they bounced and coiled, catching firelight like living gold. He wanted to touch them, to feel if they were as soft as they looked, to bury his face in them and breathe in her scent until it was all he knew. Stop, he ordered himself viciously. You're cataloging her like prey. Not prey, his wolf corrected. Mate. They talked, and with every word, every smile, every unconscious gesture, the mate bond pulled tighter. She had no idea what she was doing to him, how her laugh made his wolf preen with pride, how her passion for marine life made him want to give her the entire ocean, how the simple act of sitting beside her was the sweetest torture he'd ever endured. When she mentioned studying orcas, something clicked into place with devastating clarity. Of course. Of course his mate would be drawn to the creatures his pack was sworn to protect. Of course she would want to understand their language, to help them survive. The universe was either blessing him or mocking him. He couldn't tell which. They're dying, he told her, because she needed to know. Because if anyone could help them, it might be her. Because maybe, just maybe, there was a way to be near her that didn't involve claiming her. A purpose they could share that would let him protect both his mate and his ocean. The tears that sprang to her eyes, the fierce determination in her voice, it confirmed everything. She wasn't just his mate. She was meant for this. Meant to bridge the gap between species, to heal the wounds that were killing his ocean. But she was also young, starting college, just beginning her life. And he was a 30-year-old alpha who could barely control himself around her. So when every instinct screamed at him to stay, to court her properly, to begin the slow process of winning her heart, Kai forced himself to stand. The wolf howled in protest, claws raking at his control as he pulled out a piece of paper and scribbled his number. When you start your studies, if you ever want to observe orcas in their natural habitat, really understand how they communicate, call me. A lifeline, a connection, a way to protect her and the orcas both, if she chose to use it. He walked away before his control could snap entirely, disappearing into the shadows where he'd spent most of the day. From the darkness, he watched her stare at the paper with wonder and confusion, completely unaware that she held his entire world in her hands. She had no idea that he'd been watching her for hours, that he'd fought himself through an entire ceremony and celebration just to avoid approaching her, that giving in and talking to her had taken every ounce of willpower he possessed. She thought it was a chance encounter, a friendly conversation with a stranger. She had no idea that he was fighting every instinct in his body not to go back to her, that his wolf was clawing at his control, demanding he claim what was rightfully his, that the mate bond was a living thing between them, pulling at him like a riptide he was drowning in. Protect her, the bond demanded. Claim her. Keep her safe. I am keeping her safe, Kai thought desperately, by staying away. His wolf howled in protest as he shifted, letting the transformation take him. 4 legs were easier than 2 right now. The wolf's instincts were simpler, more direct. Run, hunt, protect the territory. Just don't think about the mate you're leaving behind. Kai ran through the night, putting miles between himself and the celebration, but the bond stretched like a rubber band, pulling, always pulling him back toward her. He didn't know if she'd call, didn't know if he'd ever see her again, didn't know if he could survive the separation or if the bond would eventually drag him back to her, regardless of his intentions. All he knew was that she was perfect, brilliant and compassionate and fierce and everything he'd never known he needed, and that the most honorable thing he could do was give her the choice. Let her decide if she wanted him in her life, even in this limited capacity. Let her be free, even if it killed him. The wolf threw back its head and howled, a sound of longing and loss that echoed through the mountain valleys, carrying all the way back to where his mate slept, dreaming of gentle strangers who watched her hair move in the wind like each curl held the secrets of the universe.
Annika's POV, Alpha Declan's Northern Territory. The bonfire crackled and sparked, sending embers dancing toward a canopy of stars Annika had never seen so clearly. Back in Vancouver, light pollution washed out everything but the brightest of constellations. Here, in the heart of the wilderness, the Milky Way stretched across the sky like spilled diamonds. She pulled Zen's borrowed jacket tighter around her shoulders, still trying to process everything she'd witnessed today. The ceremony had been beautiful in its wildness. No church, no formal altar, just ancient words spoken under an even more ancient cedar. But it was the after that had left her reeling. Watching her sister's new husband shift from man to wolf mid-stride, as casually as changing clothes. Seeing children chase each other through the trees, their forms flickering between human and lupine without missing a beat. The howls that had erupted when Declan kissed Zen, 100 voices raised in harmony that had made every hair on her body stand on end. This is real, she kept thinking. This is actually real. Most of the pack had been welcoming, if cautious, around the human sister, but Annika had felt comfortable keeping to herself, observing from the edges. Zen had warned her that not everyone would be immediately accepting, that she should give them time to adjust to her presence. So she'd found this quiet spot by one of the smaller bonfires, content to watch and listen and try to understand this new world her sister had joined. Overwhelming, isn't it? The voice came from behind her, deep, rough, carrying the hint of an accent she couldn't place. Annika turned and found herself looking up at a man who seemed carved from the wilderness itself. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with salt-streaked dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, and eyes the color of storm clouds. There was something about the way he moved, fluid, careful, like every gesture was deliberate, that made her think of the ocean, powerful but controlled, like waves that could be gentle or devastating depending on their mood. "You're Zentraya's sister," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Annika." She managed to smile, proud that her voice came out steady. Up close, he was even more striking. Sharp features softened by the firelight, and those incredible silver eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "And you're..." "Kai." He gestured to the empty space on the log beside her, his movement slow and respectful. "May I? If you're not afraid." The question made her laugh, a bright sound that cut through the night air. "Of wolves? Maybe a little. Of you?" She tilted her head, studying his face in the firelight. There was something almost vulnerable in his expression, like he genuinely cared about her answer. "Not yet." Something flickered in his silver eyes. Surprise, maybe, or relief. He settled beside her, careful to leave space between them, but she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin even through the cool mountain air. "You handled today well," he said quietly. "Most humans need time to adjust to all this." "Most humans don't have a Zentraya for a sister." Annika tucked a curl behind her ear. The wind kept pulling her hair loose from its tie. "She's been preparing me for months, though I have to admit, seeing it is different than hearing about it." "Different how?" She considered the question, trying to put the feeling into words. "More beautiful, more right, somehow. Like this is how the world is supposed to be, and everything else is just pretending." Kai went very still beside her. When she glanced over, he was staring at her with an intensity that should have been unsettling, but somehow wasn't. It felt like being seen, really seen, in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "What?" she asked softly. "Nothing. It's just..." He shook his head, and when he smiled, it transformed his entire face. "Most people find us frightening." "Should I be frightened?" "Probably." But he said it with such gentle humor, such careful warmth, that she found herself relaxing instead of tensing. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and she became aware of the way he watched her. Not in the hungry, aggressive way some men did, but like she was something precious he was trying to memorize. When the wind caught her hair again, lifting the blonde curls across her shoulder, she felt his gaze follow each spiral with such focused attention that her breath caught. Most people didn't notice details like that, didn't care enough to track the small changes, the way firelight caught in the tight coils. But Kai noticed everything. "Where's your territory?" she asked eventually, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. "Vancouver Island. Coastal waters mostly." His gaze drifted toward the distant sound of the ocean. "Different from here. Declan's pack runs the deep forests. Mine follows the tides." "Seawolves," she murmured, and something about the phrase felt right on her tongue. "You could say that." His smile was warmer now, less guarded. "Do you know the ocean well?" "I grew up in Vancouver, so I've always been around water, but I'm starting marine biology in the fall. UC system, probably somewhere coastal." She paused, then added quietly, I want to study orca communication patterns. There's so much we don't understand about how they talk to each other, how they navigate, how they maintain family bonds across vast distances. The change in Kai was immediate and profound. His attention sharpened, silver eyes focusing on her with laser intensity. But there was something else there too. Pain, she realized. Deep, genuine anguish. Orcas, he said, and the single word carried the weight of the world. You know them? They're neighbors, you could say. My pack's territory overlaps with several pods' hunting grounds. He was quiet for a moment, hands clenching into fists. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. They're dying. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? The salmon runs are failing. Pollution, overfishing, climate change. The whole ecosystem is collapsing. The orcas are starving. His jaw worked, like he was fighting to keep control. We can hear them calling to each other, searching for food that isn't there. The mothers, they carry their dead calves for days, refusing to let go. Tears pricked at Annika's eyes. She'd read about the declining orca populations, but hearing it from someone who witnessed it firsthand, someone who clearly cared as much as she did, made it real in a way that research papers never could. There has to be something we can do, she said fiercely. Maybe. Kai looked at her again, and there was something almost desperate in his gaze. If someone understood their language well enough, if someone could bridge the gap between their world and ours. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and hope. Annika felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite recognition, but the sense of a door opening to a future she'd never imagined. They talked for another hour, about the ocean and conservation, and the delicate balance of ecosystems. Kai spoke with passionate intelligence about things she'd only read about in textbooks, painting pictures with his words that made her want to drop everything and follow him north immediately. But underneath it all was that careful gentleness, the way he watched her like she might disappear if he looked away. When she shivered in the cooling air, he started to reach toward her, then caught himself, as if he'd been about to offer his jacket, but remembered it wasn't his place. I should go, he said suddenly, and there was something almost pained in his voice. Early morning tomorrow. Disappointment flooded through her, sharp and unexpected. Of course. He stood, then hesitated. For a moment she thought he might sit back down, might stay and talk until dawn. Instead, he pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, scribbled something on it with quick, decisive strokes. Annika? He held out the paper, and when she took it, he was careful not to let their fingers brush. When you start your studies, if you ever want to observe orcas in their natural habitat, really understand how they communicate, call me. She looked down at the paper, a phone number written in bold, angular handwriting that somehow fit him perfectly. When she looked up again, he was already backing away, melting into the shadows between the trees like he belonged there. Kai, wait! But he was gone, vanished so completely into the darkness that she wondered if she'd imagined the whole conversation. Annika stared at the number for a long time, her heart beating faster than it should. Around her, the celebration continued, but she barely noticed. All she could think about was storm gray eyes and the gentle way he'd said her name, like it meant something important, like she meant something important. Later, alone in the guest room Zen had prepared, Annika couldn't stop thinking about him. You're quiet, Zentraya said, settling on the bed beside her. Her sister practically glowed with happiness, still radiant from the ceremony. Everything okay? I met someone tonight. Kai. She pulled out the piece of paper, studying the number again. He offered to show me orcas in the wild. Kai offered to what? Zen's eyebrows shot up. Are you sure we're talking about the same person? Tall, intimidating, runs coastal territories? Intimidating? Annika looked at her sister in confusion. He was one of the gentlest people I've ever met. So careful and respectful. He wouldn't even sit down without asking permission. Zen stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable crossing her face. Annika, Kai is an alpha, a very powerful one. Most people are terrified of him. Why? Because he's dangerous. All alphas are, but coastal alphas especially. They have to be to survive in that environment. Zen's expression softened. But I suppose he would be different with you. Declan's made it clear that my family is under pack protection. That wasn't what Annika had sensed, though. It wasn't about protection or politics. It was the way he'd watched her hair move in the wind, like each curl held meaning, the careful distance he'd maintained, like he was afraid his presence might be unwelcome, the sadness she'd glimpsed behind his eyes when he talked about the dying orcas. He'd seemed lonely, like someone carrying a weight too heavy for one person, but too proud or stubborn to ask for help. He probably didn't really mean it, Annika said quietly. The offer. He was just being polite to the bride's sister. Annika. Zen caught her hand, squeezing gently. Kai doesn't do polite. If he gave you his number, he meant it. The question is, are you brave enough to call him? Brave enough. As if calling someone required courage rather than just basic social skills. But as Annika typed the number into her phone, she had the strangest feeling that Zen was right. That calling Kai would require a kind of bravery she wasn't sure she possessed. Her thumb hovered over his name in her contacts. Kai. No last name, no other information. Just that single syllable that seemed to contain multitudes. Outside her window, a wolf howled in the distance. Then another, and another, until the night was full of their voices. The sound should have been frightening. All those predators so close, but instead it felt like a lullaby, like being welcomed home. Annika fell asleep with her phone still in her hand, dreaming of storm-gray eyes and the gentle way dangerous things could watch you, like every small detail mattered, like you mattered. When Annika's first year of classes had wrapped up, and her acceptance letter to Dr. Chen's research co-op lay opened on her small, well-worn desk, she felt the pull leading her away from the research lab full of microscopes and cataloged water samples, and felt a familiar pull north. Annika had called her sister Zen and asked if a summer visit in the Northern Territories pack house would work. Zen was quick to tell her little sister, "You do realize Kai's territory is 1,000 km south from our territory, so he doesn't really stop by for coffee." The disappointment hit harder than it should have. Of course it wouldn't be that simple. Nothing about this strange pull she felt ever was. Right, of course, I just thought maybe... Annika pressed her forehead against the cool glass. I'm being ridiculous. You're not being ridiculous. You're being human. Zen's voice softened with understanding. And you know what? Even if Kai doesn't visit us, you're always welcome here. Declan would love to have you, and honestly, I could use help with some of the research initiatives we're setting up. Conservation work, ecosystem monitoring, right up your alley. Really? Really? But Annie, if this is about following your heart instead of your head, you need to be honest with yourself about what you're hoping for. Annika closed her eyes, letting herself remember that night by the bonfire. The way Kai had spoken about the orcas with such passionate grief. The careful respect in every gesture, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. I don't know what I'm hoping for, she admitted quietly. I just know that sitting in Dr. Chen's lab all summer, analyzing water samples and writing reports, feels like the wrong choice, even though it's the smart choice. Then come north, Zen said simply. Take the summer to figure out what you really want. The lab will always be there, Annie. But sometimes the wilderness calls, and you have to answer. 3 weeks later, Northern Territories at Declan's Packlands. Annika had forgotten how vast the silence could be. She stood on the deck of Declan's pack house, coffee mug warming her hands in the cool morning air. Around her stretched an endless expanse of forest and mountains, broken only by the distant glint of lakes and the occasional hawk circling overhead. It had been the right choice. Even after just 3 weeks, she could feel the difference in her body, her mind. The constant tension she'd carried through her first year of university had melted away, replaced by a deep contentment she'd never experienced in the city. She'd been helping Zen with water quality assessments, tracking wildlife migration patterns, and learning more about pack dynamics than any textbook could teach. Declan's wolves had accepted her presence with surprising ease, though she suspected that had more to do with being Zen's sister than any particular charm on her part. But underneath the contentment was a restlessness she couldn't quite name, like waiting for something without knowing what. "Annie!" Zen's voice called from inside. "Can you come in here for a minute?" Annika found her sister in Declan's office, surrounded by maps and communication equipment. Declan himself stood behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the rapid clip tones he used for official pack business. "What's going on?" Annika asked. "Territory meeting," Zen said, but there was something in her expression, excitement mixed with careful observation. "Several of the territory alphas are flying in for quarterly reports. Resource management, boundary disputes, that sort of thing." "Sounds thrilling," Annika said dryly, though she was curious. In 3 weeks, she'd only seen a handful of other pack leaders, and always briefly. Declan hung up and turned to them, his expression unreadable. "The helicopter from the coastal pack territory arrives in 2 hours. The coffee mug slipped in Annika's hands. She caught it before it could fall, but not before some of the hot liquid sloshed over the rim, burning her fingers. "Kai's coming here?" The words came out higher than she'd known she could squeak. "Standard quarterly meeting," Declan said, but his glacier blue eyes were watching her with the same careful attention she'd learned to recognize in all the alphas. "He'll be here for 2 days, maybe 3 if the salmon run data takes longer to review than expected." Annika's heart was doing something complicated in her chest, racing and stuttering at the same time. "I should probably make myself scarce. I don't want to interfere with pack business." "Actually," Zen said, and there was definitely something calculating in her smile now, "I think you should stay. Some of the environmental data we've been collecting might be relevant to the coastal territories. Your input could be valuable." "My input?" Annika looked between her sister and brother-in-law, sensing undercurrents she didn't fully understand. "I'm a first-year student, not an expert." Zen placed her hand on the desk and said very clearly, "You are not limited by any means, Annika. You do not need to rely on anyone to get involved in the work. You're a marine biology student, and we are not putting you through university to keep you away from the pack. You are a capable woman who spent 3 weeks analyzing our watershed data," Declan corrected. "And you're probably the only person in a 1,000-mile radius who shares Kai's particular interest in orca conservation." He flashed a charmed smile and went back to his phone calls. The way he said it made Annika's pulse jump. "You think he'd want to discuss research with me?" "I think," Zen said gently, "that you should stick around and find out." The helicopters arrived like mechanical thunderbirds, their rotors beating the air and sending small whirlwinds of dust and pine needles across the landing pad Declan had carved into the hillside behind the pack house. Annika watched from the kitchen window, trying to look casual while her stomach performed acrobatics. 4 aircraft total, each carrying an alpha and their small retinue. She could see Declan and Zen greeting the arrivals, the formal handshakes and careful body language that spoke of politics and old alliances. Then the 4th helicopter touched down, and her breath caught. Even at a distance, even surrounded by other powerful figures, Kai stood out. Taller than she'd remembered, broader through the shoulders, moving with that same fluid grace that had captivated her a year ago. His dark hair was longer now, still pulled back but with loose strands the wind caught and lifted. He was scanning the area as he walked, those storm gray eyes taking in every detail of his surroundings. Professional caution, she told herself. Alpha instincts. But when his gaze swept across the pack house windows and landed on her face through the glass, he stopped walking entirely. for a moment that stretched like eternity. They stared at each other across 100 yards of wilderness. Annika couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but meet those silver eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Then Declan was speaking to him, drawing his attention back to the group, and the spell broke. Kai followed the other alphas toward the house, but Annika caught him glancing back at the window twice before they disappeared from view. "He saw you," Zen said quietly, appearing beside her. "I know." Annika's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Zen? What am I doing? What if he doesn't remember me the way I remember him? What if—" "Annika!" Zen caught her hands, stilling their nervous trembling. "Take a breath. You're spiraling." She was right. Annika forced herself to inhale slowly, then exhale, trying to center herself the way Zen had taught her years ago during panic attacks. Smell the rose, blow out the candle, in through the nose, breath out. Better? A little. Annika managed a shaky smile. I didn't expect to feel this nervous. It's been a whole year, and I've built him up in my head so much that the real person probably can't possibly. The kitchen door opened, and Declan stepped inside, followed immediately by a figure that made Annika's words die in her throat. Kai filled the doorway, somehow even more compelling than her memories had painted him. The year had added lean muscle to his frame, carved his features into sharper relief. But his eyes, those incredible storm gray eyes, were exactly as she remembered. Intense, intelligent, and currently focused on her with laser precision. Annika. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, rough with something she couldn't identify. "You're here." "I'm here," she managed, proud that her voice only shook a little. He took a step toward her, then seemed to catch himself, glancing at Declan and Zen before settling into careful stillness. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands flexed at his sides, like he was fighting the urge to reach for her. "I didn't know you were visiting," he said, and there was a question in his tone. "Last-minute decision. I'm helping Zen with some research projects." Annika tucked a curl behind her ear, nervous habit, and watched his eyes track the movement with focused attention. Some things, apparently, hadn't changed. "Research," he repeated, and something shifted in his expression. Interest, maybe, or hope. "What kind of research?" Before she could answer, Declan cleared his throat. "We should probably join the others, Kai, if you want to get settled first." "Actually," Kai said, still looking at Annika, "I was hoping to discuss some environmental concerns with your research team, if that's possible." The words were addressed to Declan, but Kai's eyes never left Annika's face. She felt heat rise in her cheeks under that steady regard. "Of course," Declan said, and if there was amusement in his voice, he hid it well. "Annika's been doing excellent work on our watershed analysis. I'm sure she'd be happy to share her findings." "Very happy," Annika said quickly, then flushed deeper when Kai's mouth curved into the ghost of a smile. "Then perhaps," Kai said, "we could start with a tour of the monitoring sites, if you have time." It wasn't really a question, despite the polite phrasing. It was an invitation, carefully offered and waiting for her response. Annika looked at this man who'd haunted her thoughts for a year, this dangerous alpha who somehow made her feel safer than anyone ever had, and made her choice. "I have time."
Kai's POV. The helicopter's rotors were still winding down when Kai caught her scent on the wind. The mate bond, dormant for a year, roared to life like a wildfire in his chest. "She's here," his wolf snarled. "Mate, here, go to her." Kai forced himself to focus on Declan's greeting, the formal handshakes with the other alphas. 12 months of convincing himself the bond would fade, that distance would dull the razor-sharp need. He'd been wrong. His gaze swept across the pack house windows and found her face. Every carefully constructed wall crumbled to dust. She was more beautiful than he'd remembered. The soft roundness of youth had refined into elegant curves, her golden hair longer now, catching the afternoon light. those incredible blue-green eyes that seemed to hold the ocean itself, and she was looking at him like she'd been waiting. Hours. The wolf growled with satisfaction. Kai. Declan's hand on his shoulder grounded him. She's here. She's all right. He dragged his attention away from the window, though it felt like tearing off his own skin. The other alphas were watching with varying degrees of amusement. They could probably smell the pheromones rolling off him. Just taking in the territory, he managed. Declan's glacier blue eyes held knowing humor. Of course, though I should mention, we have a guest researcher staying with us, Zen's sister. You might remember her from the wedding. I remember. Brilliant girl, marine biology student. She's been doing excellent work on our watershed analysis. Declan paused at the packhouse door. Kai, some connections are worth the risk. Risk, disaster, catastrophe, the complete destruction of everything he'd built to protect himself and his pack from exactly this kind of vulnerability. But then Declan was opening the door, and she was there, real and warm and close enough that he could hear her heartbeat. The mate bond yanked so hard he nearly stumbled. Annika, her name escaped like a prayer. You're here. I'm here, she said, and her voice was exactly as he'd remembered, soft and musical with underlying strength. He took a step toward her before catching himself, forcing stillness even as every instinct screamed to close the distance. I didn't know you were visiting. Last-minute decision. I'm helping Zen with research projects. She tucked a curl behind her ear, that same nervous gesture from the wedding. What kind of research? If he could keep this professional, maybe he could survive without doing something catastrophic. Actually, Kai heard himself say, I was hoping to discuss some environmental concerns with your research team. What are you doing? Of course, Declan said with definite amusement. Annika's been doing excellent work on our watershed analysis. Very happy to share, Annika said quickly, a flush rising in her cheeks. Then perhaps we could start with a tour of the monitoring sites. I have time. The tour lasted 3 hours of sweet torture. Annika was brilliant, asking insightful questions, making connections he hadn't considered. But underneath the professional conversation was awareness so strong it made his skin feel too tight. Every time she leaned close to examine equipment, her scent wrapped around him. Every time the wind caught her hair, his fingers flexed with need. Every time she smiled, the mate bond flared. And she felt it too. He could see it in her pulse when their hands brushed, in her breathing when he moved closer. By sunset, Kai was hanging on to control by a thread. The data correlation is fascinating, Annika was saying as they climbed the porch steps. If you're seeing similar patterns in coastal watersheds, it could indicate a much larger systemic issue. We are, Kai said, then stopped as an idea hit him. A terrible, wonderful, completely insane idea. Annika, would you be interested in seeing the coastal data firsthand? She turned, eyes wide. What do you mean? My territory, my research station. I could show you the orcapods, the salmon runs, the monitoring equipment. You just want her in our territory. You'd really want me to visit? More than I want my next breath. It would be valuable to have another researcher's perspective, he said, trying for professional. I'd love to, but I should check with Zen and Declan first. Of course, take your time. Even if waiting might kill him. The territorial meetings were torture. Kai sat through hours of reports, nodding appropriately while his mind focused entirely on the woman somewhere else in the packhouse. Kai, Marcus said with amusement, your thoughts on the timber rights dispute? Kai had no idea what dispute they were discussing. I'll need to review the documentation. Declan coughed to cover a laugh. Dinner was worse. Annika sat across from him, and Kai spent the meal hyper-aware of her every movement, while Marcus's lieutenant kept leaning too close, making her smile. The wolf snarled with jealousy, and Kai's fork bent in his grip. After dinner, Kai found himself on the back deck, watching Annika through the windows as she talked with Sen by the fireplace. The deck door opened, and Declan stepped out, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey and a manila folder. Thought you might need this, Declan said, offering the whiskey. And these are the documents you missed from our earlier sessions. The watershed reports and territorial boundary updates. Kai accepted both gratefully. Thanks. My focus hasn't been entirely present. Declan's tone was dry. I noticed. They stood in silence, looking out at the darkening forest. You're going to invite her to your territory, Declan said finally. I already did. She said she'd think about it. And if she says yes, then I'm an idiot setting myself up for heartbreak. Kai's laugh was bitter. She's 19, Declan. Human. She has her whole life ahead of her. Does she seem like someone who wants normalcy? Kai thought about Annika's eyes lighting up when he talked about orcas, the passion in her voice discussing conservation, how she'd hike 3 hours in borrowed boots without complaint. No, he admitted quietly. Kai, I've known you 15 years. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at her. Declan's voice grew serious. That girl's been asking Zen about you for 3 weeks. Casual questions, but she lights up every time your name comes up. Hope flared in Kai's chest. Give her the choice, Declan continued. Let her decide if your world is something she wants. But be honest about what that world looks like. Kai found Annika on the same deck an hour later, leaning against the railing and looking up at stars. Couldn't sleep? He asked softly. She turned with a smile. Too much to think about. You? Same. I wanted to talk about my invitation. I'm still considering it, but I should know more about what I'd be getting into. Zen mentioned your territory is different. Be honest. Very different. Declan's pack is settled. Permanent structures, modern amenities. My pack is transient. We follow salmon runs and orcapods. We don't own much and live simply. How simply? No pack house like this. We have a main research station, but most of my wolves live in temporary shelters. We move with seasons and currents. Everything must be portable. Instead of doubt, she looked intrigued. Why? Because orcas don't stay in one place, and neither can we if we want to protect them. Because my pack believes in living as part of the ecosystem, not separate from it. That sounds incredible, Annika said softly. Mate understands. It's also hard. Cold, wet, isolated. Nearest town is 3 hours by boat. No cell service, no restaurants or conveniences you're used to. But there are orcas. The simple certainty nearly undid him. Yes, 3 resident pods and several transient groups. We monitor them daily. It's the most important work I've ever done. Then I want to see it. More than willing, desperate. My pack isn't like Declan's, he warned. They're not used to outsiders, especially humans, and the living conditions are basic. Kai, she stepped closer. I'm not afraid of discomfort, your pack, or you, still. The callback to their first conversation made warmth unfurl in his chest. All right, I'll arrange transport after I leave tomorrow. A few days to prepare the station and talk to my pack. A few days, she sounded disappointed. I need to make sure my wolves understand you're under my protection, that you're to be treated as an honored guest. Something shifted in her expression, understanding of the weight behind those words. Thank you for trusting me with this. I'd trust you with everything. They stood in comfortable silence, close enough that he could feel her warmth. The mate bond pulled between them, and Kai fought the urge to close the distance. I should let you rest, he made himself say. Will I see you before you leave? The hope in her voice nearly broke him. I'll find you, to go over trip details. Her smile was like sunrise. Good night, Kai. He watched her disappear inside, then sagged against the railing as his control finally cracked. She said yes. The wolf howled with joy. Mate is coming home. She's visiting. For research. Nothing more. But the moment Annika set foot in his territory, he wasn't sure he'd be able to let her leave. And that terrified him more than anything.